Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for joining us a little earlier than usual. We are here tonight for the fiscal year 2022 budget hearing. So the school committee meeting will immediately follow the conclusion of the public hearing. I will open the public hearing now, and I'll ask Mr. Jones from AACS if there is anybody participating remotely that would like to address the committee for the public hearing. It does not look like there is yet, but we will leave it open. We will leave it open for anyone that would like to participate. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Hawkins. Please feel free to address the committee.
I have to unmute, don't I? Thank you. It's complicated, so it's probably best if I explain it firsthand what's going on with the enrollment issue. Originally, the Chapter 70 Student Opportunity Act was based in a governor's budget on October of last year's enrollment figures, which hurt almost every gateway city, including Attleboro. We've lobbied since that budget came out, and they came to an agreement with the House Chair of Ways and Means, the Senate Chair of Ways and Means, and I think ANF to remedy this, which is kind of unusual that they would go outside, because the Chapter 70 is just a formula. We shouldn't have any negotiation on that at all. What they decided to do was, instead of implementing it over 7 years, to implement it over 6 years. So you'll get a little bit more that way. And they agreed that it only affects a few school districts. Most school districts weren't affected by this, but they understand that it's mostly gateway cities who probably need the funding the most. So they agreed to a $40 million reserve fund. So as the enrollment comes in on the October 1st figures, they can reimburse schools accordingly. The way it's written, and I'm waiting now to see what happens. I'll know later on tonight whether it was approved. The way it's written, your October figures would be reviewed by DESE, and they would divide that $40 million up in December. We felt that we didn't want to give that power to DESE. We have a very well-written formula in the Student Opportunity Act to make sure that the low-income school districts get what's fair to them, and it shouldn't have anything to do with what federal funds you're getting or whatever trends there were. It's that the formula was written that it should go by that, and it should be sooner, because it's already in the middle of the school year, and you don't know how much it is. So the amendment we filed would make it November 1st instead of December 1st, and the $40 million would be divided up according to the Student Opportunity Act. So when you know what your enrollment is, you could at least have some sort of an estimate of how much you were going to get. Leadership also indicated that they were more than willing to have a supplemental budget if the $40 million is not enough. My guess is it's not. I've seen estimates between $120, $130 million that the statewide that we're short because of the enrollment issue. So my guess is they would have to do a supplemental budget. But I think their word is good on that. They just don't want to spend money when the students aren't enrolled. Lawrence is already back to full enrollment. but I checked with Attleboro and we actually have less on April 1st than we had in October. So that wouldn't, we thought of lobbying for going by April 1st figures, but that wouldn't, I think Lawrence is the only school district that would have helped. So we pitched that this afternoon. We'll find out later on tonight. We'll get the consolidated budget out of the amendments. I'll find out whether they took our it's not money, it's just how it would be distributed, whether they're going to do it that way. But either way, there should be money late fall. If you can use federal funds as a bridge or something like that, there should be money late fall. And if the 40 million doesn't cover all the school districts, they will do a supplemental for more.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. And I apologize, as this is a public hearing, I skipped over a technicality that anyone speaking in the public hearing should speak either for, against, or neither for nor against the budget. So are you speaking for the proposed budget, against the proposed budget, or neither for nor against?
Neither for nor against. I apologize. I think I knew that, but
That was my oversight. I apologize.
I'm in between budget meetings, so my mind is actually someplace else. So I apologize.
No worries. And I do want to thank you for all of your efforts in advocating for the district, for all the districts in the state that have been negatively impacted by the calculations. So I'll ask.
Considering that it was probably 30 or 40 districts out of 350, I'm kind of excited that they listened to us and they took it seriously and did something about it. And in big picture, another way of looking at it that I have a hard time, because I want you to have the money in September when you start so you can make plans. But in big picture, between $120 million short for enrollment and $30 million short for making it a 6th instead of a 7th, we got 70 million. So they were pretty generous. I mean, this is statewide, not 70 million for Attleboro, but we got 70 million. So I think it's complicated, but I think that they were very responsive.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hawkins? All right. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Hawkins. We really appreciate the update and the information, and thank you again for all of your work on behalf of Attleboro.
Of course. And if you have questions, one of you can text me later on. I'm going to sign off of this because this is also my supper break. But if you have questions, you're welcome to text me.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jones, is there anyone else to speak for the public hearing? There is no one else. So I will leave it open in case anyone else does decide to log on to speak to the budget for fiscal year 2022.
Just a question, how long are you keeping the public hearing open? Is it?
I'm going to go about 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you.
We typically go about 15.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Thank you, Rob.
All right, it looks like no one else has joined to participate in the the public hearing on the fiscal year 2022 budget. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. That will move us to our regular meeting agenda. We will start with open forum. Look again to Mr. Jones to see if anyone would like to address the school committee in open forum. We're waiting to see if anyone is participating. All right, it looks like there is no one to address the committee as part of open forum. So we'll move on to the business agenda and start with our superintendent's report. So take it away, Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you. I have a brief report for everyone this evening. First, as you well know, today was our return for grades 7 and 8 to our middle schools. I'm happy to report that went quite well. Obviously, our middle schools had a chance to build on the success of bringing back 5 and 6 from a couple weeks ago. And so now that the building's back in full swing, they really were able to work out some things. And certainly having so many kids back in the building, they'll have some wrinkles to iron out, but it went well. Everyone's glad to have the kids back. The kids are glad to be back. But it is a big adjustment. Most notably, we have some pretty high class sizes, as we've discussed. And I think it was a bit of an adjustment for the kids in particular, who have gotten used to, in the hybrid mode, having such small class sizes. Things continue to also go well in our elementary schools. I'm glad to have that back and underway. So those transitions are complete, and we feel have been successful. Current conditions in the city. The good news here is that since we last met, we have had a slight decline. But before we call victory, I think it's important to point out that we're still at higher levels than we were a month ago. So we remain at an elevated level that I think is something that we should keep an eye on and be vigilant about. But at least that trend that was upward for a good month there has crested and come back slightly. Testing continues to be an important way that we keep our schools safe, especially now that we have so many people back in the building and that our distance is down to 3 feet. We have not been successful in significantly increasing the number of people who are participating in testing, but we are continuing to engage families and trying to make the case and trying our best to get more people to participate so that we get those numbers up, because the more people who participate, the more effective the whole program is. I know some people are uncomfortable with the online process. There are reasons why it really needs to be that way. And I would just encourage that if anyone at home is thinking, well, I would participate, but for that system, I would encourage you to call the school. Someone in the office there can help you, and we'll get you signed up and give you the help you need. It's whatever we can do to support greater participation. That will be best for everybody involved. In terms of vaccinations, again, it's our perspective, our perception that a great number of our educators are currently either fully vaccinated or in the vaccination process and will be very soon. We are surveying them within the week, and we'll report out what our findings are when we get that information. Most importantly this evening, I have some information on guidelines from the state. I think it's important to note that we found out last week that they have changed the guidance for contact tracing. They have moved the 6 feet contact tracing guideline down to 3 feet for schools and buses. My understanding is that in all other settings, it's still 6 feet, but I guess somehow it's safe to do it at 3 feet for our schools. And while I can't speak to how safe that is or how smart that is from a public health concern, it certainly is going to have a positive impact on the impact of cases moving forward. As we predicted and saw just before the vacation, we had a situation at Thatcher where a specific case knocked out, well, it was family, 50 people were deemed close contacts and quarantined, basically stemming from one household. So when we get down to that 3 foot distancing, when we had to do close contacts at 6 feet, we knew it was going to be the case that included a very large number of people. And I doubt that we were the only people who were feeling that was going to be a problem and started to experience that. So magically, the state came out and told us to do the contact tracing in schools and on buses at 3 feet. So that's the guidance from the state, and that is what we will be following effective immediately. Questions about that? Then the final thing, I think what everyone would like to know the most about is what's going on with high school. We were invited to a conference call for tomorrow with the commissioner. I'm hopeful that we'll be getting official word at that time, which is to say that at this time I don't have any official word on it, although I will relay that in a call before vacation, we were told to anticipate a full return for high schools sometime in mid-May. That was not official at that time because the doctors who were reviewing the data and making the decision about whether or not it's safe to bring back high school students, that they had not reached a conclusion, and at that time the state was not ready to take a stand. We are hopeful that we're going to hear tomorrow exactly what the plans are and what other changes might be accompanying that. We've been preparing all along for the possibility that the state would require return for high school, which, again, in terms of educational needs of our students and social emotional needs of our students, we would certainly like to have them back. But all the problems that we've been talking about all along still persist and leave us with a pretty difficult situation. The high school has prepared to move around classrooms so that we can distance the students. As at one of the earlier meetings, we talked about how a full quarter of the classrooms at the high school didn't fit the kids that were in them. Well, the way to remedy that is to move where classes are. So if you have too many kids in this classroom for this particular course, find a room that's available during that period, or find a room that is larger that it doesn't have a lot of kids in it for one reason or another, and swap rooms out, right? So to accomplish that, you basically have to upend the entire building. I mean, you might as well take the high school, pick it up and shake it, and now that's where everybody has to take their classes. This is a tremendous disruption, and it also has an effect on learning, right? So you're going to have science teachers teaching science class in a history room. You're going to have English teachers in a science lab. But this is what is going to be required of us to be able to bring everybody back under the guidance. And I just want to be clear that while we agree that it's been very hard on our students to not be in school full time, and that it is our goal to bring back students, and if the state requires us to, we're definitely going to meet that requirement. And if they don't, then we'll be back to the school committee to talk about what the choices are. But in those preparations, we're going to have to do things that are not best educationally, right? We're making compromises to achieve, the requirements to keep kids safe, to keep the staff safe. And the impact there is that it's not what would be best or optimal for educational purposes. But really at this point, we accept that there are larger concerns here, and the need to bring back students is an important one. And so we're going to just have to do what we have to do to make that work. But I just want the committee and the community to know that there is an impact to doing this, which is why we were always concerned about our ability to do so. And then the last piece of that is lunch, which we've always said is a problem. And at this point, we pretty much know, we've looked at all the various spaces we can use. There are ventilation problems in our large spaces at Attleboro High School. We don't have the proper ventilation in the auditorium or in the gym for us to be able to do lunch there. So we have real limitations in terms of what we could do to have safe lunch. We're either going to have to completely change the high school schedule to create extra lunches, to basically be having, lunch all day long, to get all the lunches in for the spaces that we have available to us. Or we're also investigating whether or not we should just shorten the school day a little bit and provide a grab and go lunch at the end of the day, and just give up on trying to have lunch during the day, again, as a way to make this all work. So we still have some real tough decisions to make about how to make this work. But there are things that we can do, and we're considering that we'll do to make it work if in fact tomorrow we find out that there is a specific date that we have to bring it all back through. We're fully prepared to do that, and been working hard with the administration to support their needs, so that in those last couple of weeks, bringing the students will be as successful as we've been able to have at the other levels. Questions about that? Wonderful news.
So it's the long and the short of it is that anything that brings all of our students back is going to be exceptionally disruptive to.
Yeah, and this is what we've said all along, is that at the high school level in particular, this is a mess. And as we discussed in a previous meeting, it's a mess that we can and will avoid for September, because we can make choices in this moment, which we are, that will prevent this from being such a problem at that stage. And again, just to remind everybody, it takes 6 months to build the schedule, and that process is, halfway through it at this point. So when these kinds of issues cropped up last year, it was already so far into it, it was hard to go in and make the adjustments we needed to not be in this situation, which is where we are. So we're very optimistic that we can make some decisions that will help with next year. But for the remainder of this year, bringing back students is going to be very messy. But we're going to put safety first, make sure that doing so does not put people at risk, and then everything else kind of comes secondary to that.
And going back to the contact tracing, doesn't that reduction, because I do agree the positive impact is that we will have fewer students, fewer close contacts in quarantine, but isn't the negative impact also that we may be missing out on in-school transmission that would have been identified under 6 feet? In other words.
So, yeah, that's the concern. It really comes down to how important is distancing when you're masked, right? So there's a growing feeling among some people that as long as we're masked and there's good ventilation in the room, the difference between 3 and 6 feet is negligible. if those people are correct, then there's probably not much to be worried about here. But I don't think that there's enough evidence to say definitively how that's going to play out. Obviously, they feel comfortable enough that they've done that. And I do think that, I've been a little bit glib about how magically we've made these changes, but I don't think that they are going to put us at risk unless, I don't think they're going to put us at risk at all. I think that if we're going to make these decisions, they have good reason to believe that that's going to be safe to do so.
So would they still be requiring, so during a mask or lunch break, are they considering 6 feet?
You have to be at 6 feet to take off your mask.
Right, I'm just saying, as part of contact tracing, would they consider someone that sat 4 feet away at
So
lunch?
if you're more than 15 minutes, so whether you're wearing a mask or not is irrelevant for contact tracing. It's all about your distance.
Okay.
And 15 minutes. So if you're within that 3 feet, then if you're there for more than 15 minutes, whether you're wearing a mask or not, you're a close contact.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
So the final thing I wanted to mention this evening is that I know that we have, significant concerns about the emotional well-being of our students. Their social emotional needs have been a concern throughout this year. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Ms. Regan to just review for everybody one more time all the things that we have planned to try to address those concerns moving forward. But I wanted to alert the committee that we've been having a lot of internal conversations about the need to have dedicated staff to help with the problem. And one of those positions that we think that we need for next year is a district level position to coordinate those efforts and to also provide supports to the buildings in a way that we're just currently not outfitted to provide. And that I mentioned this today because when we talk about the budget, I just wanted everybody to know that moving forward, when we get more serious about this idea of this position, that position will be funded by federal funds through ESSER 2 and would not be coming out of the budget. So the budget discussion that we're having and the budget that we're deciding on does not have an impact on whether or not we choose to do this because we have other funds specifically for this that we could be using. And we think one of the good ways to use those funds would be to fund a position at the district level. So we'll have more details on that as we flesh that idea out a little bit better. But I wanted to mention it tonight just so that one, you're aware that we're very seriously having conversations about that, but also to know that it doesn't have a budgetary impact. So when we get to that point, there's no concern that, oh, well, what, we just passed the budget, was that in it? It's going to be outside of the budget if we do pursue that. So if there are no questions about that, Mr. Stars?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in regard to that position, I understand that. So this year there are funds available, whether it's grant funds or what have you, to pay for that. I assume after a certain period of time, years or whatever it is, those funds would not be available.
Yeah, so
This position would shift to the regular operating budget.
So the way we would set this up is, first of all, we have funds for, I believe, 3 years.
December of 24.
Yeah, so we could actually fund this for a number of years through these grant funds. And it would be our intention to, in sometime in the future, make an assessment about whether or not that position makes sense and something we would want to keep, or whether we need to, say that, all right, the need was satisfied, our money would be spent someplace else, and make a decision about that and include that in the budget in the future. But for the short term, for the next couple of years, we can fund that without having to make that
And that
determination.
includes everything, all benefits, the full salary, benefits, et cetera.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, well, I'll turn it over to Ms. Regan to talk a little bit more about what we're doing in the short term.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So this summer, we are going to start by training our leadership team during the Leadership Academy in trauma-sensitive classrooms. So they'll be able to support our students and teachers in welcoming all students back. We'll also be training all staff on August 26th. That's our first professional development day. They'll also be receiving a training similar to the one that the administration will have in August. There'll also be a social emotional learning pathway where the entire session or each session of the professional development will be dedicated solely to social emotional learning and how we can support students in our classes. Our mental health grant is still available, and we are using that for our collaboration with Suffolk University for restorative practices, and the teachers there are learning how to do restorative circles. It's been successful in our middle schools and our high schools, so we're going to be continuing to do that. In our elementary schools, the teachers will continue with second steps in grades K through 5. And as always, we've had PBIS in the district for quite some time. We'll make sure that that's up and running so that our students feel positive about the interactions that they have on a day-to-day basis in school. And we're also looking to provide some support personnel as well. And in thinking about our summer programming this year, we're also looking at a mentoring program that will be in association with the academics that we're providing for middle school and high school. We'll have expanded programs in K-5 as well as in kindergarten for students to catch up on, to close the learning gaps in reading and math. And then we'll also have the transition to high school program and the work and learning program and credit recovery at the high school. And our middle school program particularly will have a lot of project-based learning programs involved, along with the mentoring as well through Coaching for Change. So this summer, we're expanding all of our programs, and we're hopeful that that will attract a lot of students to be able to come, and a lot of families will participate in this summer.
Does anybody have any, Mr. Domenici?
Just more of an administrative question, and it's great to see that we have a lot going on and a lot planned for the summer. And I get updates. I'm sure a lot of parents do. Is there like a larger effort to communicate out to the school community about these programs so that we could really try to incentivize folks to sign up?
So there'll be, thank you for asking. We're in the process of creating some documents right now that'll share detailed information about the programs, how long they are, their times, their days, all of that information will be shared within the next week or two. So it'll all be coming out so families can decide whether or not it's something they'd like to participate in.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you.
And this time I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Furtado to discuss FY22.
Take it away, Mr. Furtado.
Thank you. I wanted to just provide a couple of points of context. I think they're important. What we just heard from Mr. Hawkins is important to keep in mind. He talked about the SOA going from 7 years to 6 years, and then the enrollment trust fund to support schools that have students migrate back in. When he talked about those two things, that was, as he pointed out at the end, $70 million. At the beginning, he pointed out that the FY22 state budget was underfunding school education by $120 million. So, that the effort is greatly appreciated. I think it is an extraordinary outcome for a small group of communities and schools to receive consideration at the state level. But it's still a nice benefit for the state to not have to pay that other 40 or 50 million. In terms of the budget materials you received for tonight, that $83.9 million budget is being funded almost completely, but not completely, by municipal funds and the pass-through of Chapter 70. There's as I said, a $1.2 million expectation to be used from our $2.7 million ESSER grant, ESSER 2, that we met on today. Unless something that Mr. Hawkins just pointed out does come through for us, that's how we're going to get there. There's still another small, we think, $250,000 gap that the city is collaborating with us on to find a solution to without having to make cuts, which we're greatly appreciative of. But I do, feel responsible to point out to the committee that the city component of our budget, the non-Chapter 70 component, is essentially level funded for 22. So as we continue to work and as the budget continues to evolve, that will change. But right now, it's level funded. And I think that's those are the points I wanted to make about the budget figures that are in front of you today.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Furtado? Mr. Storrs?
Just, could you recap the three numbers that matter? So the level service, and then what the other one, the one that is what we would really need to be able to, there's like three different ones. Can you summarize each?
Sure. So the $83.9 million budget, the documents that you have do represent basically a level service program for the school district. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that, as the superintendent pointed out, there are still a lot of federal monies behind that in terms of COVID grants that are going to help us do things like the social emotional support students that under circumstances from an operating budget perspective we never would be able to do. So we do have funding to provide the supports that have been driven by the pandemic for our students. However, as has been expressed many times, we're grossly understaffed for what we do. I think we still put that number today at 8.5, something between 8.5 and $10 million. And then we would have an expectation, so that would be a $94 million budget, not a $84 million budget. And then our expectation for 22 specifically, we're going to operate, not including the augmentation to the operating budget, we're going to operate with $1.5 million, $2 million of federal funds to support what we believe are the needs for us, the immediate needs for our students over the next 12 months, starting July 1. So that would suggest a $86 million budget.
Mr. Domenici?
Yeah, and thank you for this, Mark. And just to reiterate, because of the way the Student Opportunity Act is calculating, we are about, and based upon decisions that families have made, we're a couple of hundred students less than what we would normally be, or compared to this time last year.
Yeah, so the funding components for our budget are driven by a couple of things: the demographics of our community and the number of students enrolled in the district. So pre-COVID, we had 200 more, roughly 200 more students enrolled in our district than we do now. If we were going by pre-COVID numbers, which, as this committee knows, our enrollment numbers have been very steady for a couple of decades. So if we were using our pre-COVID numbers, our state, the funding formulas from the state of Massachusetts would have resulted in a budget that was $2.5 million more than the $81 million that is represented in the foundation formula from the state of Massachusetts. So we would have been right at where we are today without the need for COVID grant coverage, and the overall budget probably would have been a little higher because the mayor has maintained his commitment to go $2 million above net school spending. So we would have been in great shape, but because of that reduction in enrollment, we lost.
Right, that's the point I wanted to make, because potentially some of that could be recouped later in the school year.
Yep.
Right, that we're currently
as of the November 1st census.
Right, potentially as of November 1st, based upon what Rep. Hawkins has been able to do, which is, we're extremely grateful for. And then ultimately, starting the count again, looking at the following budgets, we're anticipating these kids to come back, for the numbers to come up for a variety of reasons, whether folks, held back sending their kids to kindergarten, or for a variety of other reasons. So optimistically, the Student Opportunity Act is supposed to be bridging the gaps that we are seeing. So is it your expectation that we're fortunate we have the federal funds, but if the expectation, if the formula works the way we expect it to work, we should start being able to cut into that difference between what we are funding for level services and what we would really be looking to do to be, as Mr. Larson has always put it, in the middle, at the median of school funding across the Commonwealth.
Yeah, we certainly should be seeing funding benefits if our enrollment bounces back. And I think, to Mr. Hawkins' point, the state took a look at the school districts that were most profoundly affected by the enrollment decreases. Because that's the biggest liability the state would have in 23. So if they don't do anything and the enrollment bounces back, they're going to have an enormous funding gap from 22 to 23 that they're going to have to deal with in a more significant and probably more difficult way. So if they take out the big hitters now, that jump of the enrollment coming back is less of a burden for state budgeting in 23. So it's a smart move. It's the right thing to do. And a smart move from a budgeting perspective. But yeah, so as the provisions kick in and our enrollment returns, we should see fiscal benefits that will allow us to provide greater support to our students and teachers.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions about the budget? All right, so hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to approve the administration's proposed level service fiscal year 2022 budget of $83,987,621.
So moved. Second.
All right. So we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs, Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes, yes. So the motion passes. Anything else you'd like to contribute, Mr. Furtado?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Excellent. Next up is discussing our meeting schedules for the 2021-2022 academic year. Is that,
Yes, we have our proposed schedule.
I didn't know if the administration had anything to add about the schedules.
It's the usual approach, so sort of plug and play.
I know the bi-monthly subcommittee meetings got shifted a little bit to add meetings, so teaching and learning and facilities and infrastructure, correct?
Well, facilities quarterly. So we try to more evenly space the meetings to reflect the full year rather than if we're sort of operating on a 10-month basis.
Right. Excellent. So I will entertain motion to approve the proposed school committee meeting schedule for July 21 to August 22.
So moved.
Second. All right, roll call vote, Mr. Geddes, yes. Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porta,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. And I will also entertain motion to approve the proposed subcommittee meeting schedule from September 21 to August 22.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porta,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs, Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes, yes. Anything else from the administration?
That concludes my report.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our April 12th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Geddes, yes. Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, because we are doing roll call votes, I will read all three consent items and then entertain a motion. So a motion to accept a donation in the amount of $775 to the Attleboro Community Academy for their senior night activities as broken down in the chairman's memo dated April 16th. A motion to accept a donation in the amount of $37.39 from fundraising for Project Unite. And motion to accept a donation in the amount of $50 from Target to Attleboro High School.
So move.
Second.
All right, Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Domenici.
Yes.
Ms. Porto.
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Geddes, yes. That passes. So subcommittee reports, infrastructure and facilities, Mr. Domenici.
Thank you, Chairman. We met recently on the 14th. Mr. Furtado and Mr. Parento gave us several updates. I'll quickly go through them. I have no motions for tonight, so this is just an update. The new high school project, as we tend to hear on most of our meetings, on schedule, on budget. The one thing that they pointed out is the project teams are making a conscientious effort to be aware that in a lot of instances, materials are starting to get harder to get. It has not impacted our meeting just yet or our project in any way, but it's something they're being mindful of. And as of the meeting, we were 14 months away from moving into the new building. So as much as I think when we get the updates that we're somewhere around 50% of the way through the completion of the project, the reality is it's a lot closer than folks realize. So always good news there. Mr. Furtado gave us an update on the gym floors at Hill Roberts and Hyman Fine. The Municipal Building Commission has officially taken on this project. So they're going to hire a owner's project manager. I believe they're going to use the same person that's currently doing the library project. So once that's officially been put in place, they will go out to bid on the project. So that's it's moving to some degree. I think it'll start to move a little quicker with the MPC. We also talked about the facades at Willett and here at Studley. This was something I think Councilman Waterman had reached out asking about the projects and funding. I know our next steps were to follow up with Councilman Conti to see where these projects are. And it was only a week and a half ago, and we've been out for the week, so I imagine we don't have any new news yet on this one. We touched on the city solar projects. Again, these are going to be done throughout the city over the summer. We have several solar projects for different schools. And I guess the good news for that is that this has got the potential to also address some much needed parking lot replacement and repairs because of the other work that's going in. And as a side note to these projects, we also are hoping to make adjustments to the Thatcher Elementary School parking lot with the DPW over the summer as well. So we got a lot of activity going on, whether it's the new high school or at every one of our other buildings. We also touched on the performance contract. There's a lot of projects that are potentially going to be part of this particular effort. We're a couple of months away from getting the formal request needed to go forward on it. Everyone's making sure that the rebates that are normally associated with these projects are accounted for. So that's, again, we continue to go forward on that. We also talked about Wamsutta Middle School. Though the new roofs have come in, the good news there is that there's been no issues with the roofs, which is, I think, good news for everybody. It was brought to the attention of the district that there was some concerns about the building envelope, I think at Wamsutta, and then subsequently it could be at Brennan, but we haven't had any new news about that, other than to say that it's potentially a masonry issue. But again, thus far, the roofs are working the way we expect, and we've had some rain to prove that out. So more to come on that, but as of our meeting, that was the update. We also touched quickly on the fact that
there's going to be more activity in the buildings this summer, as Ms. Regan also made us aware with a lot of summer programs going on. So that's going to definitely be an increase and a balancing act as a lot of work is being done throughout the district over the summer at the same time. So there'll be some balancing for sure. And then ultimately, the state has indicated that the possibility of extending the ESSER funds that we are so generously using right now, possibly through to 2026, currently set to expire in 2024. So hopefully we hear on that. It would be some pretty good news. And that actually concludes my update, unless there are questions.
With the solar projects.
Yep.
First of all, which schools are being impacted by this?
6 of them, right?
Trying to think, the only one I think that's not, I think, no Robertson, Hyman, Fine and not. But I think the rest of them are.
And we're talking numerous solar panels on the roofs,
No roofs. It's
No
all,
roofs,
it's
all
all
parking
parking
lots?
lot canopies.
all parking lot canopies. Okay, so
But some, you know, some of them are pretty substantial.
really, okay. So years ago when we talked about solar panels, and in the end, we went with the solar farm kind of concept.
We've been providing developers credits and getting benefit from that,
And
yes.
that was based on some sort of space allocation, right? It was a space
A
calculation.
usage, a kilowatt usage.
Okay,
Yes,
so this has nothing to do with those two things, right?
it has nothing. to do.
Okay, so effectively, 6 of our schools in the parking lot spaces, is going to get these canopies with solar panels.
Yep.
Who will own those? The company?
The company
Okay, so all repairs, anything of that nature is that?
is that. The state, the city is generating revenue by leasing the space.
So the city is getting all the revenue, but the schools themselves are seeing 0 of them. Is that correct?
I believe that's the outcome.
Okay, do we have an estimate of how much revenue is expected from this?
Yes, there is a number. They actually selected a vendor of the 4 or 5 or 6 that participated. Yes, I can get that number to you.
Okay, is it significant? Hundreds of thousands? More?
I think I wouldn't want to. Yeah, it's a big number.
Thank you. I was going to hold you to a specific number. Has there been any discussion at all, which I think would be fair, with the city side, of some of that funding coming and benefiting the schools, being that it is school property that's being utilized?
Yeah, I don't think the city's made any decisions or conclusions about where that revenue is going to go. You know, we literally selected the vendor, I believe, last week. So it's very, very new. We have a whole series of meetings to go over some of the particulars about the design approach. So the vendors proposed an approach. You know, drawings, you know, this much will be covered, these many trees have to come down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But nothing that's final. So they're going to have to sort of revisit their model to take into account input going forward about specifics, and then that'll kind of refine the kind of financials and tell us what kind of numbers we're talking about. And then at that point, I'm sure the city will sit down and have a discussion about where this funding goes.
How long have we been aware of this plan?
I would say that the last 2 or 3 months were where things sort of picked up in terms of formal proposals by vendors, you know, photographs, not photographs, but really drawings. So they would take the, you know, the Google map view of a school, and then they would impose, you know, colored grid showing, you know, sort of where the solar array would go. You know, there was some discussions about some very finite information. How would the canopies drain? Because that's an important component. Lighting, you know, emergency buttons to push if you're out there at night, or you know, all that kind of stuff.
What about the wiring itself? Is that going to be underground? And is that going to the buildings? Or is that being routed differently?
I don't think it's going. There were proposals, I believe, that did allow wiring to the buildings. I believe there were other proposals that do not, that preclude that. It's all metered, but it's just a question of what meter, is it the building meter or the canopy meter? And I off the top of my head, don't want to speculate on which one the selected vendor proposed.
And will all this work be done before school starts in August?
No, I don't believe so.
So there will be disruption to the schools, at least to some degree. They're not going to be working over the evenings to do it.
These things are the proposal was citywide. So there is a sludge waste site that is part of this. There's the library. There's some areas and some parks. The basement, the Haywood Field, I believe, had it as, so there it's all over the place. I don't believe there's going to be a terrible disruption at the schools. I think they can schedule things appropriately to make sure that doesn't happen.
As far as the canopies, are they affected in any way by snow? Or is it constructed and designed in such a way that snow does not stay on the canopies? I'm trying to envision what these are going to look like and how they would be impacted by weather.
Yeah, so yeah, snow was a discussion. These things are typically at an angle to maximize exposure. So snow tends to run off these things. You can't build structures to prevent that from happening, or you can't direct the runoff to a specific area that you don't want people walking around. You also have to worry about how to plow around these things. So I don't believe that any kind of final decision on any of that has been made in terms of design and approach.
And just for the record, when it comes to the schools, this committee is overall responsible for the schools. I know it's city property. Ultimately, it belongs to the citizens of Attleboro, but we are the governing body of the schools, and that includes the parking lots, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. The committee will certainly have the earliest possible information in regards to scheduling as it pertains to the schools, and would be able to provide input prior to that scheduling being finalized or unmovable.
I appreciate the information, especially since it sounds like it's already moving forward. It's out to bid, it's been approved, and we've heard about this in the last month or two. So it's, that part's a little concerning, but thank you for the information. Thank you.
From a preliminary standpoint, I think we heard about the possibility a while back. It wasn't
it's
until
been going
recently
on.
that it kicked into high gear.
Chairman, at my February update, we found out that the extent, initially it was a couple of schools. And we found out in our February update that this project had expanded beyond not just schools, but other areas of the city. So the administration,
it was always intended to be a citywide project. It was just a question of how many
small amount of schools.
And the city had imposed some concerns about things like trees. So if there was going to be a mass deforestation to accommodate these things, I don't think the city would have participated. So that was a critical component of how these people design their approach and what these things will be, especially at the schools.
And any information you can provide to the committee would be helpful, especially so that we can understand how this is going to change the landscape of, if at all, but the landscape of the.
I'll have that for the next week.
I suppose before I close, that was the final thing that I was going to say is that since it was our last scheduled meeting for facilities and infrastructure, Mr. Furtado agreed to, give us updates at our regular committee meetings as things move along. Thank you for that. That concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Domenici. Mr. Larson?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to request an amendment to our first vote on budget. Friendly amendment to read $83,987,640.72.
So moved.
Second,
I apologize. That was my fault. I looked at two different cells as I was writing the number down. So, would you like me to call the roll?
We just need a roll for the amendment, and we need a roll for the amended motion, please.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porter,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes,
Mr. Geddes, yes. So that motion passes. So we are now voting to approve or entertaining motion to approve the administration's proposed level services budget of, I want to make sure I get it correct. $83,987,640.72.
so moved.
Second.
Mr. Geddes, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes,
Mr. Storrs? Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Larson. Does anybody have any new business for the committee? Mr. Domenici?
Just a question, and forgive me if this has been explained before, but do we have a date for the Attleboro Community Academy graduation? That can be shared.
So the Attleboro High School graduation is on June 4th. And the Attleboro Community Academy, I believe, is on the Thursday prior to that.
Yes, I mean, that's what it usually is.
I believe it's May 27th, but we can confirm that for you.
Thank you.
Any other new business for the committee? Excellent. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Mr. Porto,
Yes.
Ms. Porto, sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes, yes. Thank you all very much.